All right, everyone, we are at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 9:30 Central. We'll go ahead and get our stakeholder engagement workshop kicked off. So I'll get us started. My first note is just in case you didn't hear the notification, we are recording today's workshop. That way we can share it with anybody who wasn't able to join us and also have it for records. We do encourage you to be cameras on. You'll find that your Geosyntec and Transformations PR team, as well as TDEC folks, are going to be cameras on today as much as we can. And we encourage you to do the same. This is a workshop, it's interactive, and it's really hard to interact with each other if we can't also see our faces. So as you're able, please turn your cameras on. We would really appreciate it. My name is Ashley Ramsey. I am a project geologist with Geosyntec. I'm based in Kennesaw, Georgia, but I have been a longtime resident of Tennessee and am a graduate of University of Tennessee, so I'm really excited to be working with TDEC on the development of your next 10-year plan. I wanted to start today off with a safety moment because we are having a meeting of more than 5 people, so that is a rule of Geosyntec. Sarah, if you want to go to the next slide. So we're just going to quickly talk about cold stress. It was 12 degrees when I woke up this morning, and I'm south of y'all, so I'm sure it was plenty freezing when you got up. So just a quick reminder of 3 big steps to follow when it is this cold outside. 1, wear lots of layers. 2, cover any exposed skin. So add those extra things in your hats, your scarves, your gloves. Make sure everything gets covered. Things like Vaseline on your skin, if you're going to be outside for a really long time, can be really helpful. But if anything, please just limit your time outside and keep yourself warm. We don't want to increase our risk of hypothermia. And so we're going to do everything we can in our power to make sure that doesn't happen. Next slide, Sarah. But it's not just your exposure and keeping yourself covered. You do have to consider other risk factors. These are things like being wet or damp or dressing improperly. So do keep in mind that if you are doing some physical activity outside or you're just a sweaty natured person, any of that dampness that you're retaining can be really bad for you when you're in cold conditions. Also, if you are predisposed to any health conditions like hypertension, hypothyroidism, diabetes, if you've had heat or cold stress before, you are predisposed to have those illnesses again and those injuries. So keep that in mind every time you go outside. And also just if you are have poor physical conditioning, that can also be a risk factor. Um, Injuries related to cold are more likely to happen if you are over 60 years old, if you are a male, and absolutely if you're at home. So keep that in mind even when you're at home. If you're just running out into the yard real quick to get something, still take the time to bundle up. It is for your safety. Sarah, next slide. So I introduced you guys to myself a little bit. I am a member of the advisory services team here at Geosyntec, and I'm the assistant project manager on this 10-year plan development. Our project manager, Jill Gaffigan, has been in the industry for over 30 years and has a lot of experience with these planning efforts, but on a large to small scale. We've done these from small municipalities all the way to states and large private industries. So we do have experience with these planning efforts, and today we're being supported by the wonderful Marissa Segundo. She is with Transformations PR and has a lot of experience in the solid waste and recycling field, managing these engagement efforts on both the public and stakeholder side. So we're really excited to be joined by her today. You'll also see there's a lot of other faces here today from Geosyntec, and they will all get to introduce themselves later in the breakout session. So I hope that you all enjoy who your facilitator is today. But just to quickly name the facilitation team that's helping us today, we have Sarah, Giorgio, Kyra, Chelsea, Dalton, Lauren, Annika, and Majida. So I hope that you all enjoy getting to know your Geosyntec team. We're excited to be working on this project, and we're all here to support you all in this process. Next slide. So I mentioned the advisory services group. We are a group that offers operational and financial advisory specialties, and we do have extensive experience evaluating solid waste systems, infrastructure, assets. So I've mentioned these sort of planning efforts that we are involved in, but we also provide services related to cost of service or rate studies, infrastructure assessments. We've done diversion studies, operational reviews, waste characterization studies. So we've really looked at the whole span of recycling and solid waste industries. And we are excited to be able to help you all on this process. And I wanted to give a moment for your TDEC team to jump on and introduce themselves really quick. You actually have a large group of TDEC here with you today too, who I know are really excited to hear your opinions and what's working and what you think could be improved. Anyone from TDEC want to jump on? All right, well, just to name the few I can see already, we've got Lydia Suttles and Amy Catcher. I'm sure Christina's in there somewhere, but we've got a long list of people here with us today. So hopefully you'll get to meet them in your breakout groups if you don't already know them really well already. And I think that's all I have to say to get you guys started. I'm going to hand things off to Marissa to manage the rest of our workshop, and I look forward to talking with you all more.
Thanks so much, Ashley. So as she mentioned, I'm Marissa Segundo. I'm with Transformations PR. Super excited to be with you all today. We have a large group, which is really great. And doing this virtually, we're going to try to make this as engaging as possible. As Ashley mentioned earlier, we get into the breakout groups. We're definitely going to have you guys turn your cameras on. So be prepared for that if you're not already on camera. So this is a little bit of the agenda for today. We'll have the welcome. I'll give you a little bit of a background, the existing conditions that the Geosyntec team has put together, and then we'll talk about how this workshop's going to go. We will have breakout rooms. So when we had the ability to do this in person throughout the state over the past 2 weeks, we had really interactive breakout room, or they weren't rooms, we were in person, so they were tables. We are going to try to recreate that in the virtual space. And I have done this in a lot of different virtual space for varying size groups. So I think we can make it happen. And with your engagement and participation, we can definitely make it fun. Then we'll have a little kind of virtual networking time and a break in our brown bag lunch area. So hopefully you brought a brown bag lunch that you can kind of munch on while we are reporting out from our breakout groups. And then we'll have a second session of the breakout groups. So we'll recap. We'll likely be done a little bit earlier. We have a big group here, so we may go all the way up to through the 2:30. So we appreciate your patience. We appreciate the time that you are spending with us today. And this will be very valuable for really giving direction for the 10-year plan. So we'll go to the next slide. Background. This is what we're going to do. So jump into the first slide. As I mentioned, Geosyntec has done an existing conditions, kind of look where is the state right now? And so kind of start from the past. Why are we doing this? Well, as a part of the solid waste management plan of 1991, the state is required every 10 years to do a 10-year solid waste management plan. So 1991 seems like a long time ago. I guess it wasn't that long ago. Currently, you have a little under 900 operating facilities, solid waste operating facilities. So whether that's MRFs, whether that's landfills, HHW sites, that's all incorporated in that 900, less than 900 throughout the state. Since the last solid waste management plan, since the last solid waste 10-year plan in 2015, a lot has changed, and we're going to talk about some of those changes. And that's why we're looking to the 2035 right now. So we'll go to the next slide and jump in there. So looking at infrastructure, the main three areas we're going to talk about on this slide is essentially landfills. So since that first Solid Waste Management Act, there were 96 landfills throughout the states. Those have decreased to 30 since, to 30 since 1991, and then 4 since the completion of the last plan. So that's a lot of infrastructure lost in 10 years. What has changed with those landfills? A lot of them have turned from public sector owned landfills to private sector owned landfills. So that went from 82% to 56%. And you're seeing these in all the different categories, class 1 through 4 landfills. You're also seeing an increase in transfer stations, a little increase in composting and convenience centers. Collection sites used to be an unstaffed green box program, which many of us know. If we have unstaffed centers, they tend to become dump sites. So those have changed to about 525 staffed centers for sorting waste and recycling. And then you see about 107 of those green boxes still operate in about 10 counties. Curbside collection. We've actually seen the expansion of curbside collection for garbage and also for recycling. About 50 cities and towns through 30 counties have curbside recycling programs. And so there's a lot of areas to grow in that area. And we'll go to the next slide. The Recycling Partnership, who I feel like has become our kind of trusted authority in the recycling space, estimates about 25% of the counties in Tennessee have curbside recycling programs for their residents. So there is a lot of room for growth. We understand the barriers that exist in kind of rural counties and how that's a little bit more complicated than urban areas. Tennessee has about 96 active waste diversion operations, and that is up 60 since the last solid waste management plan in 2015. So a lot of growth there, a lot of good things we're looking at there. As the Recycling Partnerships looks at this, Tennessee is about 36 in the nation as far as residential recycling systems. So about 62% of households have access, whether that's curbside drop off, in those areas. And then multifamily, there's a lot of room for growth. It's only 6% is the estimate there for multifamily households. If you were here for the APR this morning, thank you. And I think TDEC's doing great work with the annual progress reports. That was part of that solid waste management plan. So really sharing our data between cities and counties is really where we have such a good opportunity to grow. If we don't understand where our baseline is, then our estimates for growth will be skewed. So as much data as we can get, the better. The scrap tire cleanup program, I think, is a great program. And if you were here this morning, you heard about the grants as far as scrap tire cleanup. This is a great program and a huge diversion opportunity. So if you're not currently in the know about that grant program, I hope you investigate it because it's got a lot of potential there. And then the new waste reduction goals through the waste reduction task force is a good opportunity as well. And we'll go to the next slide. Okay, we talked about landfills decreasing. Well, the population is not decreasing. So Tennessee's population is expected to grow almost 10%, 9.7% in the span of this plan. So you're going to see those in areas that are already populated: Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga. So that also increases waste generation. As we know, more people, more trash. So we'll go to the next slide. You can kind of see how that looks in the development district. So you see the Greater Nashville Regional Council seeing 9.6% growth. This in the Southwest and Southeast development districts, it stays steady, about 5% growth. That's still a lot. And then Eastern is 3.8% growth. So to plan for that growth, we have to not only look at where we're at with waste, but where we could be, what that looks like in the long term. So we'll go to the next slide. This is the breakdown of waste by types. So you've got these pie charts in the areas of residential and commercial statewide. So an overall, but you'll notice that there's a lot of similarities. So statewide, you see urban centers, suburban, and rural. Where you see the biggest opportunities for percentage of waste is recycling is usually about 38%, between 37 and 38% throughout. And then you've got organics, same thing, between 37 and 30% across the board. So a lot of good opportunities there when we're looking at different types of waste. Obviously, MSW and C&D is always a focus and always something that we have to look at new innovative ways to treat, and then shifting that to a recoverable space. I'll go to the next slide. Okay, so looking at infrastructure, what does that mean? 170 operating infrastructure throughout for recycling and diversion specifically. And you're seeing that in the Great Valley in the east, you're seeing it in Nashville Basin in the middle part of the state, and then the Gulf Coast Plain in the west. So there is opportunities to grow that in the places that we're not seeing it. And then you can always, even in places that already have it, there's still a lot of appetite for recycling and diversion. We'll go to the next slide. Landfills similarly mirror the recycling as far as location and not necessarily the numbers, but the location and where it's where they're geographically located. So looking at the future, we're seeing the landfills decrease. So as we're looking at the future, focus on expanding recycling, diversion, and maybe even out-of-state disposal opportunities, especially for areas that don't have it near the borders. And we'll go to the next slide. This is kind of a summary of the existing infrastructure. I'm not going to kind of go through each one of these, but you see, no matter what stage they're in, there is a certain amount of maintenance that needs to happen if you have a closed landfill or a not operating landfill. There's permitting requirements and compliance that needs to be addressed in all of these situations. So it just kind of gives you a little bit of an overview, and we'll go to the next slide. Okay, looking at specific challenges and opportunities. We've kind of hit home with with the landfill closures and expected closures. What does that mean? So what can we do? Policy regulation updates are an opportunity. In our in-person breakout or workshops, we talked a lot about policy, not as much about regulation, and then looking at incentives for recycling and waste diversion. And we'll go into some specific examples here in a moment. Increasing access and participation for recycling programs, expanding and then focus on rural areas where possible, kind of thinking outside of the box to offer those convenient options. People really want to recycle. Every survey that's gone out, people always say they want to recycle, but they need it to be convenient. So offering those opportunities to residents is key. Insufficient infrastructure for processing and end use. If we can't process it and we don't have end markets and we have not attracted end markets, then our recycling efforts are in vain. Tennessee is ripe with opportunity for end markets, and really having that data, having the baseline and showing end markets that this is an attractive place for a consistent supply of quality recyclables is really going to make the difference, as not only as a waste diversion opportunity, but even an economic driver for all of this. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, we talked a little bit about organics diversion, and this is a huge opportunity, really promoting composting and organic processing. And the same thing I just said, it really showing the organics market as an opportunity to attract end markets and processors within the state is key. They're having rural areas and having opportunities to divert organic waste and replenish soils is such a full circle moment and important for the state. And then raising awareness, education about waste reduction. As someone who works in strategic communications for recycling and sustainability, I cannot tell you how important it is to not only say, oh, we should do this or we should have education. You should invest in education. The same way if you have a fleet of trucks, that you would put hydraulic fuel fluid in your truck to make sure they run well. If you have a recycling program, you should invest in recycling education. And I think we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so here's a summary of opportunities for improvement. These are ones that Geosyntec looked at best practices, what's going to work based on your, or what could work based on your existing conditions, and also looking at best practices in similar sized and geographic states. So these are suggestions for your recommendation, but as we are going into breakout groups, we would love your opinions and in addition to these as well, your reaction to these and your additions as well. So pay as you throw, that is when we talk about incentivized recycling and waste programs or waste reduction programs, this has proven very successful in a lot of different places. I feel like when you say the word incentivized, people think they're getting paid for recycling. This is the opposite. This is where the savings comes in. You pay less for garbage when you don't throw away as much. So pay-as-you-throw programs are good. Mandated organics diversion. I know mandates are not always popular, and this is where we're going to have some maybe uncomfortable discussions about mandates and policy and things like that. That's okay, because we're going to create a safe space to do that in. Places that have had mandates for organics diversion have had success, even if it's a voluntary program. A lot of places are catching on to organics and really making that happen. Strengthening recycling markets, as we talked about just a moment ago, if we show commodity markets that you have a consistent and quality supply of recycling of these commodities, they're going to come running. They're going to want these things. So strengthening the markets, there's a lot of different ways to do that. Extended producer responsibility. We're seeing entire states that are looking at EPR legislation. There's also options for VPR, voluntary producer responsibility, where the private sector is actually taking responsibility to have recycled content in their products and be part of the solution. The regional waste authorities, that is successful in a lot of different places. Ohio has a really good group of waste authorities. That's a good way to pay for and collaborate on contracting, on infrastructure, on a lot of different aspects of your waste program. So something to consider there. Coordinated recycling programs across regions. If you're in the same MRF shed or you have a cohesive recycling program, please communicate with each other, share your best practices and data as you can, whether those are educational materials, whether those are opportunities, thoughts, transfer stations. There's a lot of different things you can collaborate on. And that kind of just rolls into the joint infrastructure investments. Transfer stations are great, collaborative MRFs and collaborative household hazardous waste. Infrastructure is fantastic. So anytime you can come together and not reinvent the wheel with things like that and work regionally instead of in silos, those are good opportunities. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. All right, here's the workshop introduction, my favorite part. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so this is the part where we put the work in the workshop. We want everyone to turn their cameras on. It's okay if you're in your pajamas. We're not going to judge you. This is a safe space. We are breaking down these silos. We're working together to lay the foundation for the 10-year plan for the state. And so all of your voices are very important. We want you to participate. We want you to collaborate. We want you to put on your magic fortune teller hat or whatever and tell the future. This is supposed to be a crystal ball. It doesn't really look like a crystal ball, but we're going to tell the future of the next 10 years of solid waste planning within the state of Tennessee. We also will, we'll be talking specific to regions as well. And you'll see that when we get to the big breakout groups. We're also going to talk about ways to measure success. So we can have a vision, but if we don't have a way to measure whether that vision is successful, when we come back 10 years from now, we won't have anything to measure it by. So we're really going to talk about measurement as well. Before we start in our breakout groups, we're going to ask a couple of live polling questions. So let's go to the next slide. Here's how it works. Fun QR codes. You can do this a couple of different ways. So one, Ashley's going to put a link in the chat. You can also take your phone and scan the QR code that you see and take the poll from your phone. Those are options. Or if none of these options work, you can also text. So you would send a text as if you're sending a text to your best friend, and your best friend's telephone number is 37607. To enter the poll, you put Marissa Polls. That's my name, Marissa Pollz. It is not cap sensitive. I don't think you put any caps in there. And then from there, you should be in the poll as soon as Sarah goes to the next slide. Okay, so this starts our poll. We're asking you to use just one word to describe the current direction for solid waste in Tennessee. Oops, Sarah, I think we're seeing a different slide. There you go. There we go. So as these, as people start to take this, okay, we're seeing them come in. So a word cloud happens that if people put the same word in, it will get bigger. So we're here seeing downward, and we're seeing compost. Compost is getting bigger, political, limited. And be honest, like I said, this is a safe space. We want your honest opinions, because if we don't talk about elephants in the room, we won't see the elephant in the room. We can't deal with the elephant in the room. So we're seeing limited get bigger, political's getting a little bit bigger. Now political wins, declining is in there, downward. Cost, I see cost in there. Sometimes it takes just a little bit for these to come in, but there's like, I don't know, 41 people on this call, so these should be coming in. Reduction, declining. I don't know. Now it's moving. Okay. Expensive. Political got a little bit bigger. Limited got a little bit bigger. Now limited is getting bigger. Broken. Increasing. NIMBY. Yep. NIMBY's always the situation. Overbearing. Expensive got a little bit bigger. Okay, I think we'll go to the next one in about 3, 2, 1. I think political one on that. I didn't see anything else new. Okay, so we will go. Thank you for participating in our first poll. You guys did great. We're gonna go to the next slide. So at the end of this day, when we come back, what we want to do, as I've mentioned, is the vision for waste in 2035. What does that look like? We want to help to narrow down your priorities based on where you're answering from. Excuse me. And then we want to look for collaboration opportunities and really get that input specific to your area. So we know that the state has different benefits and barriers depending on where you're located geographically. And we want to make sure that that is a key part of this input and the direction. So we're going to ask you a couple more questions, and let's shift to the next slide. Okay, now notice that this question asks, what is the biggest challenge currently affecting your program? So this is not challenges. This is the biggest one you can think of all these options. So we have funding, infrastructure, education, collaboration, and other. And if you say other, I may ask you to unmute and tell what the other is. Or you can also put your other in the chat as well. If you haven't used the chat yet, you can just scroll or like kind of mouse over the bottom of your screen and you'll see this little like, what are those little cartoon bubble things? And then the chat should appear on the side of your panel there. Okay, so we're seeing funding being the largest challenge. Oops, tied with infrastructure. They're going neck and neck. That's like a horse race. And then we have education at 12%, along with collaboration. No others yet. So you don't have any others as a big challenge. Now we see funding going up to 44%. Is everybody in? I don't see it moving. Everybody got their challenges in? I don't see anything in the chat. Okay, you see infrastructure creeping up. All right, I'm going to end this one in 3, 2, 1. Infrastructure and funding are tied. I'm sad to see that the education and collaboration went down, though. Okay, thank you for playing. So just notice that infrastructure and funding are top of mind for everyone, and we didn't have anyone. They thought these were covered all the categories, so we didn't have any others. Let's move on to the next slide. So now we're going to talk about opportunities. This one, I'll let you have your top 2 biggest opportunities. Opportunities are endless, and we know that likely it's all of these things. However, we want you to narrow down your top 2. So we're already seeing infrastructure and collaboration come in along with policies. Yeah, infrastructure, it's going up and down. We're going to see an education come in. I don't know if you saw the EPA's report on the needs for recycling that came out, I think, last week. And they were talking about potential in all of these different areas and where the funding, how much funding is necessary for our recycling systems to improve. And these areas were covered, and education was a big one. So policies are 37%, 27% for infrastructure, education down to 13, regional collaboration 23. We don't have any others. Is there any, even if you didn't put others, does someone want to add an other to the chat? This is an interactive day. We want you to talk to us. And now I can't even see your faces, so I don't know if you're like smiling or excited. I'm just assuming you're all smiling and super excited about what you're doing. Okay, so you see regional collaboration is up to 25%, policies 33. We're gonna have a lot of good discussion about policies in these breakout groups, I feel like. Okay. Oh, seeing the collaboration go up. All right, so we're gonna close this one in 3, 2, 1. Regional collaboration, good job. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, this one's a little tough, and we're gonna need. You should be able to see all of these options if you're on your phone or online. I may have Sarah. I don't know, Sarah. Sometimes it's tough to pull that little thing down. It's okay. We'll see how it goes. There you go. You're doing great. So these are all the development districts within the state. If you want to, just pick the one that you most identify with, even though we can't see the full name on this particular slide, you should be able to see it on your poll. And then those answers should be rolling in. See them moving. Sarah, can you click on where it says response? There you go. There we go. Okay, so we're seeing 50% from Nashville, greater the GNRC. We're seeing from First Tennessee. Hopefully y'all can see those as they're coming in. A lot from East Tennessee. All right, seeing a lot from Nashville. Okay. So this will give us an idea of kind of looks like we don't have a lot of representation in that Southwest Tennessee Development District. Do one more up and down and then we'll move on. Okay, so East Tennessee and Nashville are our winners. Not that it's a competition. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Environmental justice. And we have a link we're going to put in the chat here too. The EPA has an excellent tool for environmental justice. It's called the Environmental Justice Screener. This is something where you can put in your zip code, you can put a specific address and it will give you a lot of different factors that look at the environmental justice factors of your specific area. So whether these are socioeconomic factors, language barriers, whether it's potential other environmental issues. Waste is actually an area that it pinpoints any regulated facility throughout the state. So it's important when you're planning to really understand what your area and what your region looks like. We talked about regional collaboration. So maybe you understand your particular city, county, or town, but maybe expanding your knowledge of what is around you and potential existing conditions that may hinder new growth or development of a facility, or impact to neighbors that are underserved. So things to bear in mind as you're growing and as you're looking at opportunities to divert waste. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, recognizing that every region is specific and your needs are specific. If we're looking at the entire state of Tennessee, how would you compare your particular area to other areas of the state? And if you want to add put Nashville and then your thing, you're welcome to. If you'd rather remain more anonymous or want to put maybe your development district with your comment, that would be good. Otherwise, they'll just be factors we can keep in mind. Diminishing landfill capacity in Nashville. Yep. Access to a lot of recycling. Come in a little bit. Oh, okay. Thank you, Lisa. I see your comments in the chat. Please use the chat. It's so fun. So Nashville having closed access to recycling facilities, lack of public composting infrastructure. We have a landfill in our county, that's RIA, and lack of end markets. Logistics for recycling, some areas are too rural recycling areas. We're seeing Middle Tennessee decline in landfill capacity. Yep. These kind of come in, they should come up where you see them at the top here. Oh, looked like it was moving. Oh, it's okay. It's gonna start over. So we'll just we'll have a little recap. Okay. They're seeing lack of end markets. I think we're back to where we were. Logistics for recycling. Some areas too rural. I think there's a couple more that we saw before, and then the newer ones will pop up. Middle Tennessee, transportation options as landfill capacity declines. Yep. Accessibility for future growth in Franklin, Tennessee. Focus on disposal versus diversion. Lack of options for expanding landfill capacity. Illegal tire dumps. Knoxville, limited compost options. lack of end market in our area. Our solid waste region board has just our county, Shelby County, very little recycling, not a lot of industry. A lack of funding limits adequate infrastructure. No public sector owned infrastructure. Yep. Middle Tennessee, lack of collaboration among the largest counties based on population. We have a composting facility and are looking for an operator, Memphis/Shelby County. Excellent. Okay, is that everybody? Is everybody in? Going once? Going twice? Sold. Thank you all for your contribution. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so this is where we are breaking out into groups. And this is where we get to see your beautiful faces. So we'll go to the next slide and I'll show you the instructions here. Where Sarah's multitasking. Okay, so here's our breakout groups or rooms. We have you all divided by development district, and there are multiple rooms per development district. So we are trying not to place you with people who have the same organization at the end of their name as you. So we can expand your organization's input in multiple groups. So you will be automatically placed in a group when we start this. We already talked about maybe turning your cameras on will be very important. And our fantastic helpers from Geosyntec will be your scribes. So you don't have to worry about writing anything down. We're going to have a worksheet that we're going to go from, and Geosyntec is going to help us capture your thoughts that you're saying. So we'll go to the next slide. This is how the breakdown of the breakout rooms are going to be. You'll have 5 minutes to introduce yourself. Say your name, your role in the organization, and how long you've been in that role. While you're going around, at the end, after we do these groups, you'll have to have one person be your main reporter. Our Geosyntec folks are capturing the notes with your input, but we want someone in the group to be the main reporter. So if you want to volunteer, that would be great. And if not, that everybody's just going to point at one person and they're going to have to report out. Then we'll have about 10 minutes. Oh, wait, you need to choose one focus area. Sorry, that's the number one thing. So while you're going around your group, after you introduce yourself, you're going to talk about what is our focus area. And maybe this is one of the ideas we saw on the existing conditions. Maybe it's one of the areas that you said you wanted to focus on: the funding, the infrastructure, education, policy, any of the things you saw you wanted to focus on. So the group decides what their focus is. And then pretty quickly after you choose your focus area, we're going to brainstorm. What do we know about this one thing? Just rapid fire. These are the things we know, and what are the things we don't know? You don't have to know everything, and that's okay. That's what we're going to do as we go through the SWOTs. Now, when we do the SWOT, and I'll show you the worksheet in a moment, you'll have about 45 minutes to complete that portion. This time goes really fast, and there's opportunities to get lost in the details. So we'll when we talk about the rules, we'll explain a little bit about how we can avoid that. And then after the 45 minutes, we will come back to the main group. You'll actually automatically be thrust back into the main group after the time is over. And we'll give you little time cues and that kind of thing. So we'll switch to the next, and then we'll do about a 15-minute report out. This is what the first side of the worksheet looks like that our Geosyntec folks will be populating. So I mentioned your knowns and your unknowns. And then the SWOT is your strengths. What are we doing well? Very simply. You don't have to have everything perfect. Maybe we're not doing everything well. And that's why we need to shift over to the weaknesses. What are we not doing well? Where are there challenges that we can work on? Then shifting down to the bottom left corner is the opportunities. What are the opportunities that exist? Where can we improve? And this is where you kind of think about this in a way of, maybe you've already said funding was a weakness. So maybe you put grants in opportunities or funding opportunities, public private partnerships, whatever. I'm just throwing things out. And then you have threats. What could possibly mess up our idea? What is something that could get in our way, a barrier? Things will come up that may be germane to what you're talking about, but may not fit in the SWOT category. So that's where that notes section exists, and our Geosyntec folks will grab those notes. We will shift to the next slide and talk about the rules. I've mentioned from the very beginning, my probably first 3 words on this was talking about this being an open and collaborative process. So we want to give everyone a chance to talk. Smile, listen, engage. Your facial mannerisms and whatnot make a big difference to creating that safe space. So make sure that the people on your team know that you are part of the team and you want to actively participate in this collaborative process. Somebody in your group should just keep an eye on the time. I think our Geosyntec folks will also keep an eye on the time, but just keep an eye on the time. Make sure that you're kind of populating this worksheet as you go through, because like I said, we have no choice. It'll just kick you out of the room come the time that we determined. And then here's the thing: when we said everyone is in a safe space, we know too much in the waste industry. We tend to go down rabbit holes. So if you find yourself or you find someone in your group heading down a rabbit hole that is not specific to the to completing the worksheet, anyone can say Elmo. And Elmo is not a little creepy Sesame Street character. It means enough. Let's move on. So, and you can say that with a smile. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. We want to make sure we're capturing those things in notes, but not spending our whole time going down a rabbit hole. Okay, so I think is there one more slide? I don't know. Oh, okay. Nope, go back. All right, so now we will be shifting you into the breakout rooms, and I will be popping in and out of rooms to help you all, making sure everybody's has the tools that they need to be successful within their breakout group. And if you have any questions, you can ask them within the group, or we can keep in communication with your group.
So what time are we actually going until?
What's that?
What time are we actually going until?
So we'll be in the groups until about
about
probably
12:10. Yeah, 12:10,
12.
12:15. We are in the process of setting up the groups. Unfortunately, fortunately, we have some extra people, but also we have people who have joined with names and/or combo organizations that are different than what you registered as. So I'm actually going to have Majida unmute herself.
I wonder if maybe we will. I feel like, should we take just a quick 5-minute break in case anybody needs to just grab some food or a bio break or something really quick and come back in 5 minutes?
Yes, please.
Yeah, we've all been in front of our computers. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. That'll be 12, basically 12 20 or so. That'll give us 7 minutes. I'm giving you 7 minutes. But please come back, because it's going to be the highlight, to hear all your good work.
What's the next session after this? Because I'm in Central Time.
So our first group
Is Ashley Ramsey.
Yep, let me share.
And who will be reporting out in your group, actually?
We have Ella reporting.
Give a virtual round of applause to Ella. Or an actual one. Just may not be able to hear it.
Cool. So, hello everybody. My name's Ella. I am at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and I run their compost facility there. So that's kind of where my specialty and expertise lies. So we decided to talk about organics management and diversion, largely compost. And then we had a smaller group. There was 2 other people from more rural counties, Jefferson County and Morgan County, dealing with like landfills. But so for the knowns, we talked about not having a lot of opportunities for public composting throughout the state, specifically in Knoxville. It's one of the few cities that has a municipal composting program. It's very small and limited in what like food scraps they can take, just general limits on what's available to the public. And then there's also very low landfill tipping fees and lack of mandates to kind of encourage diversion. Some of the unknowns that we talked about is there's a lot, like especially in the rural counties, there's not a lot of knowledge in like what is currently available for organics diversion, and also like how to get into that realm. So the like operation education, how they can do it, what's the right mix, the science and art of it, as well as like the collections and the infrastructure required. And then, of course, funding for getting those things started. So for strengths, there, again, like I said, there is some limited composting options available throughout the state, and people want to know more about it and what's available, how they can get involved. There is a lot of material that can be sourced that's already being collected, like there's a lot of yard waste and carbon rich materials that already are available. And that's also, we kind of said that that's a good opportunity to get into composting, is just already having that one source available, source of carbon. And there are currently at least one, I know for sure, grants through TDEC for organics management, specifically keeping it out of landfills. Weaknesses, lack of knowledge and education about what goes into composting and what to do with end product as well, for like people purchasing it, how to basically get the benefits out of it, what those benefits even are. There are some available compost products that are not super high quality, that have some like plastic and metal contamination and kind of like give a bad rep to composting. So just education, it's a big one. And then rural areas, people can often self-manage their yard waste because they don't have either maybe it's too far away, or costs money. It's just easier to do by themselves. For opportunities, definitely can see more development in the end use market, especially in rural areas, partnering with farms and other like people who are interested in getting the benefits out of composting. Farmer co-ops was one thing that was mentioned. Permitting for small operations, making it easier to open up facilities and get them going. Education, huge one, I think, in all of these areas where we could do better with getting the value out of products, the availability of them. And then talked about that already. So a lot of landfills already have mulch collection and carbon collection that they're doing. And some landfills also accept biosolid sludge, which could be a source of nitrogen. And so basically there's already some of the ingredients required to make compost, which is great. Just need the kind of infrastructure and knowledge of how to do it, how to run it, how to collect it, and then the end market, of course. So, and threats, a lot of things we already talked about: public participation, education, and then especially in rural areas, geographically challenging locations, and kind of tying into education again, is just like having a lot of the finished product that maybe you're not able to get out and redistributed, whether that's because people don't know about it, don't know the benefits, it's too far away, those kind of things. And then social media and can maybe not always be it can be a double-edged sword where it can be really helpful and powerful to get education out there, but also spreading misinformation is a big thing with just sustainability kind of being a buzzword and greenwashing and people not knowing kind of what exactly should go into a compost bin and maybe shouldn't. I saw a couple questions. I didn't actually read them yet, but that's pretty much all we talked about. Yeah, that's all I have to say. So, if there's any. I saw a question that said someone would like to know more about landfills that are mulching yard waste. Who are they owned by? What are they doing with it? So I don't know exactly all of them, but I know there's quite a few out there where it was, I think Morgan County and Jefferson County, can't remember if they both said that they were already collecting and had mulch available, but those were the only two people that I was talking to. I think that's it for me.
Okay, great. And good job using the chat. I didn't see as many reactions, so I'm hoping everybody knows where the reaction buttons are, and you can also react to people that chat. So just bear that in mind. Our next group
Is Sarah.
Sarah. And who's reporting out from your group, Sarah?
That
would be Jay.
Yes.
Right, Jay, take it
also-
away. Applause for Jay.
Also East Tennessee and also at the University of Tennessee. So Ella and I work together. And I am not gonna do as great a job as Ella just did. Is there a time limit? Can I just start with that? Do we?
I mean, try to summarize, but I mean, I think we'll make up time.
Okay, I'm actually probably going to try to do this pretty quickly. So our target area that we talked about was recycling plastics, but it it ended up being largely a discussion centered around pay as you throw, just really trying to find ways to incentivize plastic recycling, make it more convenient. But I think people can largely read the knowns and unknowns, and I think a lot of those are pretty commonly knowns and unknowns. So there are some strengths. I'm in the city of Knoxville. Curbside recycling is available in cities like Knoxville, and it's pretty convenient. At the University of Tennessee, we also have our own recycling facility. So some employers are collecting recyclables and taking those from people at a public type of drop off. And then even at convenience centers, most of those are recycling plastics as well. Some of the weaknesses, well, you can read those, but education, I think, is a big part of it. If it's not benefiting people financially or in some other way, people don't tend to care a lot about it. And then there's recyclables that even curbside recycling doesn't collect. We talked about ones and twos being fairly commonly collected in the recycling of plastics, but not the other recyclables. And in some cases, weaknesses include making it really difficult to recycle those plastics with different removing the labels or removing the lids, or sorting by different colors or different numbers, etc., making it difficult to recycle those things. So what opportunities exist? Obviously, lots of education. There's an opportunity to make it more convenient as well. So whether that's adding curbside recycling collection or simplifying your collection methods, also emphasizing the benefits and incentives. And one of the incentives we thought people would be excited about would, kind of in the dream scenario, find ways to take those plastic materials and recycle them in your local economy, whether it's an existing business that could use those materials in their processes to create some new products, or create a new industry in your community that can take those materials and make them into 3D printers, or or use them in 3D printers rather. Not, I guess you could make 3D printers out of plastic, recycled plastic too, but really just using the material as in 3D printers. So those are some of the big pieces we had there. But then the pay as you throw idea, there were a lot of barriers to that. The concept is a good one, but we saw lots of barriers. So one way that it could be done, we talked about, was different communities pay different amounts for different carts. So if you have a trash cart system in your community, say there are two 96-gallon bins, one for trash, one for recycling, you can either in one community, you could pay the same amount if you shrunk your 96-gallon cart to a 65-gallon cart, but if you kept your 96-gallon cart, you're going to have to pay more for trash versus just paying the same amount for recycling, or even free recycling. So that was one way that we talked about, one community had done. Even in Knoxville, you get one trash cart and one recycling cart, once a week for trash, once every other week for recycling. But if you need more than that, you do have to pay for it. So that's one way that incentivizing not creating more than 96-gallon of trash, which it's kind of mind-boggling if you really think about it. That's a lot of trash for a household. It depends on how many people you have in your household, though. So anyway, what were some of the threats? Recycling plastics it can be labor intensive or require very expensive equipment to optically sort, or other ways to get good, clean, recyclable material out the back end. And right now, recycling plastics is tied to petroleum prices, and gas is really cheap right now. It doesn't feel that way, but it is. One of the other things we were talking, three of the people in our group run a not Knox County, but Greene County. They have 17 convenience centers, and there's really long lines at those convenience centers sometimes. So if you implement a pay as you throw, how do you do that without angering people and keeping your employees safe, as well as just how do you get people through that line that's already existing? So those are some of the weaknesses we talked about, or threats rather, I guess, that we talked about as well. So I think that's it for me.
You're muted.
Yeah, Marissa, you're on mute.
Marissa, you're muted.
I just said a whole bunch of good stuff, and now you guys missed all that. I just wanted to say that I thought the level of detail that you all went in, and how you kind of went down a road to talk about pay as you throw and incorporating that to solve for a plastics recycling option was really good, and will be helpful, especially in the next portion of our breakout group. So keep that in mind, and definitely keep your SWOT sheets close. So it looks like Giorgio and Jen are ready to go to talk about their focus area. Is that right? You guys both came on camera, so that's what I assumed.
I'm good to talk.
Giorgio, did I put you on the spot?
I'm ready to go. And Jen, is that you want to go first? We were separate groups.
Oh, sorry.
We can also go in order. So the next person would be Annika.
Oh, sorry. Annika was also the same group as Dalton, I believe.
Hi, I believe my group was merged with Dalton's group, so I guess we have the same note, because like West Tennessee, it was merged with the Mid Tennessee.
Sure.
Yeah, that's correct. Our speaker was Philip for our group. And so for the
Okay. You ready for me?
Dalton,
y'all
do you
ready?
think you could share your screen?
Sure. 1 second, please.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you
We,
zoom in just a little bit, Dalton? Sorry.
That's all right.
There you go. That'll make it a little easier.
We've talked about skewed data collection and the reporting and our performance tracking that goes into the APR reporting, the data that's collected by the state every year. What we talked about was that the knowns that we had were that the counties are responsible for residential material tracking, and that gets supplemented at the state level by the industrial, commercial, and institutional data that comes in to TDEC. We're pretty confident we know our landfill capacities, and we know that other states out there are using formulas for tracking data. Our concern was the unknowns, the inconsistent reporting of the industrial and commercial waste to the state. We also know that there have been changes in recent years in commercial and residential behavior that has shifted some of that commercial waste from businesses to the residential waste stream. We also know are concerned that our transfer station volumes in some situations may be duplicating waste volumes that are reported, like a transfer station in one county in one region may also show up in disposal volumes that are reported by another county in another region. So our reporting of residential numbers for garbage and recycle, we feel pretty confident what's going to the state is pretty good information, but we do think that there's a weakness at the commercial and industrial side of what's being reported to the state, and that may skew some of our policy decisions as we move forward, because we're focusing on this, the residential subset, but not looking at the full waste stream profile. Opportunities wise, we know that North Carolina and other states use some standard formulas for reporting waste, and that may allow for some consistent data, more consistent data tracking at the state level. Our threats is recycling and composting are not necessarily required to be reported, especially by unpermitted facility. Not all recyclers, I guess recyclers are not required to be permitted in Tennessee, and not all composting operations obtain permits. They may be either larger scale private or just otherwise just composting programs that aren't reported. And we think it's also a threat that reporting is dependent on the accurate voluntary reporting by both public and private entities, and that can skew data as well. So that's what we had.
That's great. Keep that close, because this is a really important aspect of the planning, is to have this accurate reporting data to not only make sure that you understand where you're coming from, but also the potential of where you can go. And so if you can have those and show your particular region as an attractive region for recycling development or composting development, that is a really good way to do that. So yep, and I'm seeing chats come in too about the other threat is the way the state defines landfill diversion, and defining the material as C&D going to landfill as diverted may skew numbers. So having discussions about kind of what is diversion and what should be counted as diversion it's an important one going forward. Great. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to Giorgio's group.
Next
And
is
then it'll
actually
be
Chelsea.
Me, Chelsea from Giorgio's group, or the other Chelsea?
Chelsea Anderson.
I think that's us. All right. From our group, we have Jen that's going to be doing our presenting. Let me share my screen right quick. All right. Can everybody see it? Hopefully.
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect.
Okay, so we also looked at organics in particular, ended up kind of settling on mandating organic conversion. In terms of our knowns, we, of course, it's a huge opportunity area. Lots of organics are ending up in landfills, particularly MSW landfills. There is a lot of potential to expand, particularly, for example, we're Middle Tennessee, so talking about Nashville's composting facility, and they have a lot more capacity to take more material. So Nashville is unique and Middle Tennessee is unique in that way. Known that there are state grant funds, but also needing to understand waste characterization studies and have those implemented. Those are things that are needed to be able to address these issues. We talked a little bit about some of the data that Nashville has produced in terms of organics diversion, in particular our curbside food scraps collection program. Of that 750 participant program, it's very clear people understand how to compost far more than they understand how to recycle, with contamination rates being very low compared to recycling contamination rates. And then also another known is that there's not really a diversity of options for large scale composting. We have a composting facility, we're lucky for that, but that is, that's about it. So there's just, oh, and then also the varying options for collecting organics between yard waste and food waste as well. So some unknowns, we identified some regulatory barriers that fall under the unknowns, kind of a misunderstanding of maybe some of the regulations and how they're, how commercial entities might, I'm trying to think of the specific example that we had for that, but not necessarily understanding regulation in a way that it creates a barrier. For such as drop-off sites and things like that. Are also know that transport costs and funding, trying to remember, they're high, transport costs are high, all of this, and there's not funding. And then compliance. It is, it's very difficult to enforce compliance on bans of yard waste, was something else that was unknown. So in terms of our strengths, we kind of talked all over the place between both residential, commercial, organics, but we do know that TDEC does provide those grants. Those grants are being awarded to be able to move projects forward. Also, education for composting is working. We've seen numbers grow in programs that we do have and participation levels. And there's also a lot of folks that are focused on helping for composting, both locally, statewide, and nationally. So there's a lot of partners out there that can support efforts to grow organics collection, whether that's NRDC nationally or Urban Green Lab locally, or there's others, I'm sure, across the state. And then also this one was something that needs more investigation, but the composting facility in Middle Tennessee has had some fairly competitive costs with tipping fees. So it's not as, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as much of a barrier cost-wise. In terms of weaknesses, definitely regulatory barriers, both for commercial and small scale. Composters, especially when you're looking at, you want that larger compost facility, but what about some of these smaller community composting facilities, and how can we increase a diversity of infrastructure with so many different regulatory barriers, whether that's state or even local health, stormwater. There's just so many different things. And what's a path forward look like? Again, lacking diversity and options, transport costs and funding. Of course, funding is going to be a weakness. We talked a lot about how a lot of these waste management programs are funded, whether that's property taxes or fee for service. And when you make changes, how do you not upset people and actually have dedicated funding for these programs to allow them to expand when landfill costs, as we've talked about, are so low. Then also, with so few options, how did those new companies or new facilities get started in terms of those initial finances? How do they make the numbers work? Again, we ended up hitting a lot on regulatory requirements and talked a little bit about, in particular, about schools and certain entities and their requirements and how that can impact organics diversion and how much schools throw away. As well as the difficulty of recovering food from schools or from other entities, and how those logistics are overly complicated. Opportunities. So again, working with some of these large generators was something we hit on. How do we get resources to some of those large generators, like a refrigerator for schools? Helping kind of connect those dots with whether that's grant funds or otherwise. There's also that whole section of yard waste and debris in Nashville. We only collect it 4 times a year. So how can we increase that collection just in general of yard waste that's coming down? And I would say it's both for residential as well for all the commercial land clearing that's happening. More targeted funding sources. We didn't necessarily have an idea of what that is, but know that we need more targeted funding sources for these programs. Lots of opportunity for collaboration. We discussed a statewide requirement for organics and how that could be incredibly helpful to really push this forward and focusing on the large producers of waste. Threats. With everything, lack of infrastructure, if you're going to make a requirement, this wasn't in particular to state regulation. If you make that requirement, there's only a few places that you can take compost at any scale right now in Tennessee. So how do you phase that in, or how do you create a mandate when you don't have the infrastructure to support it? So chicken before the egg. Then while I think folks we talked about, residents understand how to participate in a program, but they might not necessarily understand what the processing looks like on the other side. So we ended up talking a lot about how that limits or impacts the location of these facilities, public perception of composting facilities, or even anaerobic digestion facilities, and getting that public support piece when there's a little bit of a disconnect there and how people understand what happens with a composting facility. Talked a lot about the barriers in siting facilities and identifying people to actually run them. Jackson Law, just a barrier for a lot of things. And then also talked about compostable plastics and just the complication of contamination and the materials that go into these different programs, especially if you've got an anaerobic digester versus a traditional compost. And then we also talked about privatization and just that lack of, without public infrastructure and lack of competition, how does that impact costs moving forward? So we were a little all over the place, but had a lot of really good discussion.
That's fantastic. Good job, group. And I like how you mentioned the public-private, we saw in those existing conditions, the amount of public landfills going down, but organics is kind of a little bit of the wild, wild west right now. So this is an opportunity for public investment in organics that not only could divert the waste, but also be somewhat of a revenue source if it's done correctly, or a public-private partnership. So a lot of good opportunities there. So good job. One of the things I didn't mention, the last 2 groups, if we didn't get those, were Middle Tennessee, and the next 2 groups are also Middle Tennessee. So before that was East. We had 2 East groups, and then West Tennessee merged with Middle, I think is what happened there. So, or no, the West Tennessee moved to get, I don't know how that one worked, but anyways, so now we're gonna send the mic and screen over to Giorgio's group 6 from.
That is correct. And I'm gonna share my screen and Chelsea will present.
Just make sure you zoom in so everyone can, maybe it's just my old eyes. I can't see anything.
Zoomed in enough.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. I'm Chelsea Hamilton. I'm with Vanderbilt, and we had kind of a mixed bag in our group, and we decided to talk about the recycling markets. One of the big knowns that the group identified was that there's a big difference between rural and urban areas and infrastructure. And some of the challenges that came along with particularly rural areas was unpredictable vendors, consistency in finding places for recycling to go. And then, a lack of infrastructure just generally for everybody. Some of the unknowns that we identified were the changes that happen around plastic types that are accepted. Processing costs tend to be challenging and unpredictable for everybody. And then cost was a main driver of a lot of decisions that different entities are making. And oftentimes, as we know, it's more expensive to recycle than it is to throw it away. So some strengths really circled around. There's lots of opportunity to make recycling happen. AKA we're talking about some places that have zero recycling. So there's a lot of opportunity for growth in that area. Construction and demolition waste was identified as a big area of opportunity. And that, at least in the Nashville area, we have a MRF, so we have somewhere to start. At least there's nothing there. Some weaknesses that were identified were collaborating with material management. It's hard for more rural areas or smaller districts to really gain the volume they need to make the cost work. So it's harder in those areas to make recycling work. Opportunities were really focused a lot around collaboration and how can more rural areas or smaller communities collaborate to kind of get to those volumes that economically make sense, logistically make sense. How can they share in some of those costs? And then talking about funding and what are the potentials for funding so these programs pencil. And then, can AI potentially help us as we go down this road, and allowing processes to become simpler, less labor intensive, et cetera. Some of the threats, we focused on a little bit about mandates, and how mandates might be good, but they also create a lot of costs. So mandates need to come with resources, significant resources to achieve those goals.
I like how you guys touched on the C&D recycling. I like how you mentioned that, kind of on the same wavelength, although we do know that C&D recycling is kind of its own thing, but I don't think it's talked about enough in the area of there are valuable commodities within the C&D waste stream. And if there is an opportunity, a collaborative opportunity to separate those materials out, the metals, the asphalts, the different, gypsum and things that happen within C&D, especially when you have a lot of buildings and whatnot that are trying to get LEED certified, those are all really kind of a perfect storm that could happen on the positive side for recycling. So definitely a good area to explore. Thank you for reporting out. Okay, I think next we have Kira's group. They are, wait, what part are you? You guys are still Middle Tennessee. We're not even Middle Tennessee yet.
My group merged with Kelsey's group.
Oh, okay. So, but Kelsey's group is Middle Tennessee. Oh, okay. So you didn't report out. So it's Lauren then. 7 or 8. I don't even know what's happening. Group members.
Yeah, I think we're group 8. I'm gonna share my screen.
Okay.
And Rachel is presenting. Yeah, she's there. Can you guys see my screen?
In a moment we will. Now we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello. So we had a nice small group. So we're West Tennessee. Basically, I work in like City Hall in Memphis for the Office of Sustainability and Resilience. And then Janet was in our group and she runs this organization, Clean Memphis. And then we had Lydia, who's from TDEC. So we really were talking about Memphis specifically and what we saw as being possible for Memphis. So our knowns include that. So we were talking about mandating organics diversion because we feel like, and it seems like a lot of people have been talking about that, which is interesting. And I don't know if it's partly because organics seems simple, relatively speaking, in the sense that like, in my mind, increasing plastics recycling involves a lot more like end market understanding, and that might be harder for some of us to understand versus like composting feels a little bit more direct and so maybe more accomplishable to some of us. That's how it feels to me, anyhow. So we in Shelby County, a couple of the municipalities already collect and compost clean yard waste. Clean Memphis runs Project Green Fork. And speaking of schools, which I think Jen maybe was talking about in terms of Nashville, they're working on a pilot to help recover food. So they do a lot of food recovery from restaurants. They're working on food recovery from schools. And then there's like private groups like Compost Ferry that do residential, you have to collect the food and drop it off at their site. So we have people in the community that care about organics diversion. It's happening at some level at the municipal level already. It's happening with private groups and nonprofits. A big unknown is what's happening on the agricultural side in terms of, food recovery. That might be, gleaning is when you take crops that aren't normally quote unquote maybe good enough or left behind over the first harvest, but is there still room to collect those and sell them or, do anything with that? So agriculture, everything happening with compost in that sector is like pretty unknown. I think I said kind of the strengths that just like people care, there's work being done. We actually just got a grant to get a compost facility at the Memphis Zoo. So they're going to be doing compost there. Like we're working on getting the compost facility in Memphis running. But the weaknesses are there's so many little groups, organizations, different charities, and we're not all coalescing as one singular unit. And it kind of relates to opportunities we were talking about. I'm relatively new in my position, so I don't want to say like it's the fault of bad communication. It might just be me being new, but it's good to hear about what composting is happening in other parts of the state because I'm really not familiar with that. And I haven't heard about it really up till now. I didn't even know it was happening. And our solid waste region board in Memphis is just Shelby County. So it's really easy for us to be insular and just worry about our county, although we have other plans that do connect to the other outside areas besides Shelby County, but it can be, we're such a big metropolitan area too, that it can be easy to never have to hear about the other areas in Tennessee and what they're doing, but it's really useful. Janet mentioned that I think NDRC or NRDC, I forget how the acronym is. Yeah, NRDC is said that there's 5,000 tons per year of rescuable food. So that's compost and organics diversion, again, from a rescuable food standpoint. And then some of the threats or blockages there are, stores don't want to donate food that the best by date is passed, even if that's not really a problem, so that is a big problem in terms of rescuable food. But then on the other side is trying to just reduce people's food waste, food that isn't rescuable, but the education portion of like, how can we learn to reduce food waste altogether, which has to do a lot with school education and getting kids interested in those ideas to start with at a young age. So reducing food waste there. Trying to think. I guess that's mostly what we talked about. There's probably more stuff to be said, but that kind of covers everything.
This is great. Clapping for you. There's a couple of things that came up here that we haven't heard in the other groups. I'm so excited to hear how everyone is like focused on organics. Like, good job. That's exciting. And that's just because I'm a waste and diversion dork. So, but I think it's got a lot of good opportunities.
Yeah, and I should also mention, like, we're working on the Shelby County solid waste plan right now as well. And so, like, we're getting some numbers back about like how much of the waste going to landfills is organics. And it's a lot. It's probably like, I forget what the number is, but it's like around like 30% or something, you know? So it's like, it would make a big difference to divert it. And it seems like people care. And it seems like, and there's ways to look at not just from a landfill side, but from we're reducing food insecurity side. So there's just so many different angles to come in at for organics diversion that I really like, because you can kind of tailor how you phrase it to people based on what you think will make them the most invested in this issue.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I love to hear you guys are working with the zoo. I think that's they're a huge user of waste in general, but like poop from the zoo is a lot.
Yeah,
So
and they're
if you
so
can figure
public, so
out
there's
that in
such
your
good room
plan.
for education.
Yeah. And then I don't want to miss the fact that this came up in the chat, it came up in yours, the food rescue idea. So that's something that if in the next part any of these organics groups want to dig into a little bit more deeply, that's a good opportunity, not only to divert the waste, but to actually come up with like a measurable way to do so. So just kind of food for thought there. I believe that's all of our groups. Majita, am I missing anybody?
No, you've got everyone.
Okay, awesome. So I will invite Sarah to share her screen. Say that 5 times fast, and we'll talk about the second part of this group. While that's coming up, we're starting with a poll, and it's not really a poll; it's more of a qualitative. What have you found interesting that we've done so far in the breakouts, in the existing data, whatever we've talked about since we started? Oh, come back. This, you can put a sentence. It's not just a one-word thing. So whatever you want, whatever comes to your mind as interesting that we've approached. May take a minute or two for the responses to come in. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of really great ideas about mandating organics collection, emphasis on organics waste diversion. We also heard from recycling markets. That was good. Great ideas about recycling. Group focused entirely on data. Excellent. So many people are interested in composting to help reduce waste. Indeed. What else? Small group focus on something different than we've always done. Exactly. There is progress being made, especially when you compare areas of Tennessee. There are places further along, even they feel, than they have far to go. Yep, that happens. All right, these are coming in. While these are coming in, recycling and composting are good areas of focus. While these are coming in and we talk about the next steps, one of the things I would mention is as you're looking, in case this didn't come through earlier, as you're looking at planning, try to not limit yourself to the limitations you know of. So as we do this, and we usually tend to say like, oh, well, we tried that one time, or that won't work because of, or people will never do X. Try to like put all those ideas out of your head and imagine you have a magic wand that whatever you wish can come true. So whether that is in the area of whatever the area of focus that you're picking is, if it's budget wise, you have unlimited resources, unlimited budget. So all of that is the mindset that I want you to enter as we enter the second and final part of our breakout. So I think these all came in. I don't actually know if this is live though, Sarah, because it looks like, but it's okay. Let's move to the next slide. Thank you for your participation. Great. Breakout groups part 2, same rules apply. Open and safe environment, collaboration, smiles, everybody's happy and ready to participate. We'll go to, I think, yes. Okay, so this is the second part of the worksheet, and it's very small here, but you will see as our wonderful Geosyntec team is helping out in the same way that they did earlier, just to facilitate note-taking. But this time, we're going to take an area used in your SWOT, and I'll take Jen's example because she came up with a lot, and you all came up with a lot and had a lot of different ideas. Maybe you take one of those ideas within your SWOT area and you put legs to it. So you put a goal to it. Maybe you say, I would like to have a regional organics collection program, and then you have to say a time frame. So maybe it's from 2 years from now until the next 10 years, or maybe it's starting tomorrow or whatnot. Then we got to look at the collaboration. Who needs to be involved? Who should be at the table? Maybe it's, the governor of the state or or TDEC or economic development. Whoever needs to be involved. Who is going to create the foundation that we need to move this forward? So you put all that, maybe it's not names and faces, just general organizations, or if you know an actual person that should be there, that's okay too. Impact. So what does success look like? When this is launched and is, looking back, whatever time frame, what would success look like and how do you measure that? Resources are really important. It's something I always say we, because I used to, run a recycling program. So I've been in your shoes and I know what's going on, and resources are key. Some of those are shared resources. Some of those are free resources just by talking and collaborating with one another. Some of them are very expensive resources. So that's where you put the resources down. Once again, with your magic wand, not with your negativity wand. Just go ahead and break that and put that aside. And then on the last one is additional considerations. So the stuff that you're like, I don't really know, but it's a good idea. And this is probably something that likely you're headed down a rabbit hole, and then you're like, okay, let's just put that under additional considerations and move on. So this is where we really turn our SWOT into action. This gives you the opportunity. I would imagine that your facilitator will be scrolling up and down from your SWOT sheet to this sheet, because you've already come up with really great ideas. So you've already started to take the first steps and just narrowing down some of those concepts and putting them into practice for this goal setting part. Does anyone have any questions? And if you do, you can put them in the chat or you can unmute. So we're going to shift you back into the same groups. I believe, Majita, I actually didn't look. We think we may have lost some people at lunch. So are we still good with the same groups?
Yeah. So for now, we're going to keep the same groups. Your group might be a little bit smaller, but at this point, I don't think it's best that we merge anybody, just because everyone's worked on their own topics and stuff.
Okay, so we will be putting you in this group. You will have, once again, another, it'll probably only, it may only take 30 minutes, but we'll go ahead and put that timeout. Is 30? We can start at 30, and if we need longer, we can extend it a little longer.
Yeah, I bet.
Ashley,
30.
did you have something you want to say?
I think 30 is great.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
I'll open up the rooms now.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Don't forget to turn your cameras on. We want your reactions. The thumbs up, the thumbs down, the smiley faces, the hearts, whatever you have to the ideas that you're hearing. But just as a quick summary, in case you weren't here for the first part, we did our SWOT. We kind of narrowed down the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for whatever focus area we had. In this portion, we took a specific idea and we turned it into a goal with a time frame. It's essentially almost a SMART goal. So I didn't ask you to fully SMART goal, but a SMART goal, as we know, is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. So that's what we're trying to do with all that information. And we have another worksheet to go through. And then after we go through this, we'll have a couple of live polls, and then you'll be free to have the rest of your day. So we will start with our first group, which is Ashley's group, number 1 from East Tennessee.
That's us. All right, you guys should be able to see my screen.
That looks beautiful.
And Brian, you're up, man.
Excited for this right now. We discussed doing a regional recycling and diversion facility. Of course, Morgan County, we're a rural county, and we kind of try to think outside the box, and it's always about financing things. So the goal on what this would look like would be to establish an operational recycling and diversion facility per region. We would accept all compostables and recycling in a region, and serve as the processor of the materials, which would then sort, bale, sell, and compost based on regional need. The timing on this, we know that anytime government's involved, it slows down everything. So we're looking at probably a 2 to 3 year window of the project from start to finish. And you're talking about getting it designed, permitted, construction, and getting the funding to be able to operate this thing. Who would we have at the table? The collaboration, it would include solid waste directors. It would include, of course, county, city mayors, TDEC, the development district, and state legislators, and then the end markets with your material processors, farmers, and people that would need to be involved in that process also. And then also we'd invite the public to participate, and so they would be able to buy in also. The impact, of course, will be financial. Would be the savings and operational costs that we'd be able to reduce that on. And just for Morgan County, for instance, we serve 22,000 people with 6 workers, and that's 3 of those workers are inmates. So we're really stressed. There's a lot of stress on our employees to get the work done, and it's a big process when you think about collecting all over the county, and then also bringing it back to the location and bailing it, and then trying to get it ready to send out. So there should be a lot of things. It also would reduce tonnage to our landfills, which would be great. And then of course we would be able to directly measure this tonnage and materials going to the facility and have accurate data tracking and reporting as a result. So there's a lot of factors involved there. And then resources, of course, it's all about funding. Depending on how many counties you got involved to collaborate, there would be some cost sharing between the participating entities. And we did not, it might be a case where if we're a small county, we may partner up with a couple of bigger counties. It might be where population or tonnage would be the percentage on how much money you would fund that with. And then, of course, we look at all the grants available, federal and state, to help make that this a possibility. And of course, you'd always have to look at land, the right to topography, and then also the location would be suitable for all the counties involved. Of course, labor, you'd have to have people to be able to staff this operation. And then, of course, educational campaigns for awareness and involvement. And then additional considerations, of course, you always got to consider transportation costs and limitations there. And then will folks be receptive to potentially paying additional fees, even if it's a small one? So that's kind of what our pie in the sky would be to have a, recycling diversion facility, regionally located. Anybody got any questions or comments?
Excellent. We had some chats come in about TDEC having grants available for projects like this. Your fellow colleagues were saying you did a great job, and we had some applause from that. This is a big goal and important, and something that it could work in several different places. So I definitely think it's something for consideration, and you all covered a lot of different aspects of this. So good job being comprehensive and kind of really even realistic with the time frame. I think I heard you all talk about the magic wand and not being limited. So that's really important as you're looking for this, but it definitely helps to put the kind of foundation to make something like this a reality.
Absolutely.
Good job. All right. So now we are staying in East Tennessee with Sarah's group, which is group.
All
I don't
right.
even know the numbers.
Go ahead and share here. And our table lead is Jay again. So let me.
Yeah, you said that with so much enthusiasm, Sarah. I'm kind of feeling it too. So I apologize in advance for those who have to, everyone who has to hear me twice. So we decided to tackle the big elephant in the room of pay as you throw, with the kind of end goal of using the money to increase and improve recycling markets, particularly for plastics. So we kind of combined our top two ideas, if you will. So what does success look like? People not shooting the messenger. I think that's what success largely looks like, right? People getting to keep their jobs and people abiding by the rules and making pay as you throw work. So, and then using those funds to make both trash collection and recycling more convenient for people, right? So if people are going to have to pay for something, they want to be able to see something immediate and tangible. And so that pay as you throw, like you've got a choice. You can either spend money on taxes, which you don't have any control over, or you can choose to recycle and not pay as much as throwing things away, right? So, and then you're seeing the benefits of the money that you're paying directly in making that recycling and disposal more convenient for you, whether that's increasing access to new transfer stations or adding curbside recycling collection routes. And of course, we want this to start immediately, but it's going to take a lot of collaboration. We talked about industry being the biggest partner, getting either local companies to handle the material or to even change the material that they're selling in the local markets to make it more recyclable and easier for people to use and not have to throw away, right? If everybody's just producing items that can't be recycled, it's, people are just going to have to pay more. So working with industries to change those materials and also to take the materials that are being collected for recycling and using them in the local industry to create new resources. So having additional routes and additional hours at curbside or at convenience centers rather creates extra jobs, potential for new businesses to come in and add collection routes, and the ability to create more of your annual budget from the sale of the materials that you're collecting from the public as well as some of the areas of impact there. And so what resources are needed? Obviously, it's that chicken and egg question. It's got to be more convenient first. So how do you do that and make it so? But those are the types of resources that are needed to more convenient centers, additional hours at those convenient centers, and more staff, more collection from the public. And it's going to take some surveys of how best to, what people are willing to pay, I guess, is a way to look at that. And then finding federal incentives, local incentives, money, funding is always the biggest question. And yeah, the additional considerations I mentioned, the one, if you're not paying for it in per bag, you're paying for it in taxes, and you really don't have a say in what happens with that. So some of the considerations there. So I think that's it.
Okay. That's great. I appreciate that you not attacked the elephant, but you addressed the elephant of pay as you throw in a kind of in a comprehensive way, really putting the auspice on the community to understand it. Maybe it's a small fee that you're paying now that you haven't paid in the past, but it could mean a larger, tax implication or something that's a little bit more long-term or unchangeable. So I think it's a really good opportunity to have that discussion with the public, whether it's in the form of a survey or public meetings or anything like that. But then making sure that you have kind of the politics internally figured out as well. So good job, group. All right, now we are shifting over to Dalton and Anika's group.
All right, and our speaker again was Philip. So Philip, if you wouldn't mind talking on what I'm sharing here. Can everyone see my screen? Philip, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, we were talking again about data collection and the reporting and tracking of accurate numbers back to TDEC for waste and recycling. So what we think success looks like is consistent reporting that accurately represents where our materials are coming from, those APR numbers that we submit back. We want to clearly define those numbers and make the data change proofs. We were concerned about either loss in institutional knowledge or changes in personnel that result in the numbers being tracked differently, whether it be trucks, tonnage, diversion, cubic yards, that kind of stuff. When should this begin? ASAP. The sooner we get those accurate numbers, the better. Collaboration wise, we looked at TDEC and local governments, frontline labor. Those folks that are working on the backs of trucks are very integral to data collection in my experience. End product users also, I think knowing what's out there and available, what we can use is important. And then also some partnerships with TEMA and FEMA. I know East Tennessee has seen that locally in recent times, but we've had several FEMA events over my tenure here with the city. And those events can create large blips in your waste generation that can skew your historic trends. Impact, just improve planning, improve budgeting, and accurate costs to our end users, to our customers, passing that along to them and making sure that we're being accurate with what the true cost of the solid waste collection is. Resources, we think there should be, I guess, some, again, standard formulas that we talked about before, but templates in place that help kind of box the individual communities in as they're reporting back to TDEC, boxes in on those numbers so that we're, the numbers that Memphis and Shelby County are reporting the same as, Davidson County and other counties around the state. Also process operations plans that can coincide with diversion reports, so that we know not only like what's being processed and kind of mass balance that back to what's being diverted out and reported as total diversion. Just additional consideration, the cost to communities, the potential for loss of institutional knowledge, and how our numbers are being generated, are just things that need to be considered. That's why, again, acting now, before we get another round of brain drain, is important.
That's great. Thanks, Philip. I'm curious. I didn't know how deep you all got into it feels like you touched on the storm debris when you're mentioning FEMA. Did you guys dig into that as far as like what that would look like? Maybe, I mean, and maybe that's down a rabbit hole, but from a TDEC perspective and actually keeping track of this data from year to year, a storm event, we all know that throws off all waste numbers, and it's not necessarily accurate to what a normal, I mean, hopefully that's not our normal all the time, but maybe
No,
that is.
we did talk a little bit about it. We didn't dissect it, but we talked about it for a little bit, and Becky had some good points about just like if you don't report it, if you're not like identifying it as identifying a storm event that did occur, and kind of isolating the waste generated related to those events, it gets blurred in, and if you don't keep that record, especially as you see turnover transition in the leadership and the folks that experience the event, people forget, and so they either forget or just don't have the knowledge that, hey, there was something big that happened in 2012, and that generated a lot of debris. I see, Shelby County did great in vegetative waste diversion that year. What happened, and people don't know that there was a big Mississippi River flood that year, and it generated a lot of waste that we got credit for diverting, but it was skewed our normal trends.
Right. And when FEMA gets involved, it's now it's their storm debris, but you have to it's all, so it does make it very complicated. So I'm glad that you pointed that out. I wanted to make sure others heard that, because I'm sure are having similar thoughts. So good job. All right, next group is Giorgio. Do you have the same representative?
No, my groups got merged, so I passed the ball to the next one.
Oh, okay. So who's the next one? Is that Kira? No, Kira's was.
It's Lauren.
Yeah, I think that would be.
Okay.
So I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, can you all see it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Lydia is gonna present.
I can, or if Rachel is back. She was going to get lunch.
I am eating, so if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. Okay. Can you scroll up just a little bit, Lauren? Okay, so for our backside of our SWAT, we kept with our front mandate organics diversion. Our group is down a little bit. Just kind of the two of us. We weren't sure really what we wanted the term organics to mean, whether that be like household organics, a little bag of compost picked up, or more of just yard waste and everything. But what does success look like? Obviously just decrease organics going into a landfill. We've got by 50%. That's just a number we kind of borrowed from our group member from the morning. But that is why stop at 50? We have a magic wand on this one, so we'll see how far we can take that. And then everyone having access to composting, whether that be just more places, more composting facilities, of course. more trucks, more infrastructure, just having, it's like, yeah, composting like on paper is simple, but it just is a huge undertaking. When should this begin? By 2035? We talked about sort of a like exponential report out. And so maybe like if we had it across the 10-year plan, maybe like every year you increased your organics diversion by 10%. And so after 1 year you had 10%, after 2 years you had 20%, or if you looked at it at a 5-year term, maybe after 1 year you had 20 and then 40 and 60 and so on. But having organics bans, and ban is a strong word, but having organics diversion policies, they have to be very gently done. And so we just kind of wanted to correspond with the 10-year plan, since that seems like that's what we're doing here today. How can we work together? Who should be at the table? Obviously regional solid waste boards. We talked about maybe narrowing down, the existing solid waste, like who reports together. We talked about maybe narrowing down like what a board is. And so because most counties are not part of a regional solid waste planning board. And so maybe if we made a board just for organics, it would be easier to cooperate and collaborate. Because sometimes, counties don't want to be a part of a solid waste board, or can't, because it's just like this huge kind of broad, so much. It's like, municipal solid waste and your 10-year plan and your storm plan and all this. But if you just had it for organics, a board just for organics, maybe every county could be a part of a board. Obviously lawmakers, local city officials. So yeah, mayors, solid waste directors, everyone should be at the table. It should be a huge round table completely. If I had I'm a transparent person. That's why I like working in government. So everyone should be at the table, who is passionate about seeing this done. And I think we didn't know where to put this bullet point, but having regular meetings to see where we're at. Yeah, so just again, like kind of from like what success looks like is just like an open path of communication. So definitely just meeting often to see like where we're at, maybe even, quarterly, or you have these like lofty 10-year goals, and sometimes they fall through the cracks because nobody really knows, who's doing what, or you don't see each other that often because it's not people you see and talk to every day. And so just really just keep on it. Yeah. So impact, what potential metrics do we have or could we have to show impact? So we want more waste characterization, more waste audits of to track contamination, whether that be from the people picking it up, so training the drivers to not pick it up and not accept it if something is, if some brush is laying out on next to your garbage can, don't pick it up. And just monitoring solid waste origin data, just to see that year by year decrease of tonnage. Hopefully we just see an overall decrease in tonnage, and that wouldn't necessarily be the case, because I think generally MSW is like rising unfortunately. But hopefully if the organics was down, then it wouldn't be such a growth, and hopefully it would eventually be all decreased and what was going into a landfill. What is needed to accomplish the goal? So yeah, working compost facilities in every major area. So just more composting facilities. Like, where is it actually going? I'm personally passionate about just in markets of any kind. Like, I am always asking that, like, where's it going? What's happening with it? I just feel like if we can solve, the processing of these diverted materials, then like the rest of it can iron itself out a lot easier. So curbside pickup trucks, compost and yard waste. And that, for that to happen, everyone would need a truck. Everyone would need that infrastructure. So yeah, and then also alongside that, fines associated with having, not complying. Of course, that wouldn't be like an overnight thing. That would be part of the gentle, 10-year implementation of this. Check if waste is being sorted properly, target areas where more education is needed to do this. Again, that's going to take a lot of collaboration, whether, with and education, of course. Yeah, training truck drivers, that kind of thing. Additional considerations, what other factors specific to your region should be considered? So just making it clear the positive impact composting has in the community, what the benefits are, really kind of keeping it objective about, landfill space is limited and we cannot just continue to put everything into a landfill. This can work, it does work, and and to not be like, to not talk about, climate change and yada yada, just keep like that can get very like heated and political, just like very objective, like this is needed to reduce what is going into a landfill. And what Rachel said, like I liked what she said, like no human on earth wants more landfills. Really, no one wants a landfill nearby. Nobody wants like it's in literally every single person's best interest to not have so much stuff in a landfill. So just keep it really objective. Education funding, workforce specifically for education on solid waste. That's kind of just speaks for itself. Yeah, that's what we got. Anything you have, Rachel? Anything I missed?
No, I think it was pretty good.
All right, that's what we got here.
Okay, that was fantastic. So I appreciate that. We're going to switch to the, because we're kind of running low on time, so I want to make sure we get this last piece in here. Thank you all so much for your input and working together. We have just a couple final questions we're going to ask, and then we'll open it up for discussion. But we talked about resources and going back to that magic wand or not limiting. What resources do you currently have or would you like to have in the next 10 years? So magic wand, anything you want, not personally, I'm not gonna give you a winning lottery ticket or anything like that, but for your program, in order to, if you were to implement any of these things, or even just to do your current program better. And if we need to, I don't know if everybody's still in the same poll or if we need to put that in the chat again.
I think there was still one more group. Did you want them to present as well?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I thought that was our last group. Let's sorry. You can
that's
still
our
answer
group.
this resources question, but we'll sorry.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen real quick. And then Jen, if you want to go ahead whenever.
Yeah, I'll be
I
real
didn't mean
quick.
to forget about you guys. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So we stuck with mandated organic diversion as well, but we focused on public schools. So our overall goal, we did get a little bit in the weeds on some things, but the overall goal would be to set some kind of percentage-based incremental goal, like phasing in after so many years, this percent, that percent of reduction in food waste, but also create tiers, percentage tiers based on socioeconomic grouping of schools, really wanting to look at some of those, making sure we're not negatively impacting disadvantaged communities, and really taking that equity piece incorporated into this mandate, especially with so many different schools across the state, making sure that we're putting in requirements that people can actually meet based on their circumstances. But then with the other overall goal of just every single public school in Davidson County, in Tennessee, having some kind of food recovery or reduction program, even if it's just a basic share table. And then with, of course, pie in the sky, capture or recover and redistribute all organic waste in schools. Our timing, we kind of were flip-flopping. This is where we got into the weeds. I think too many of us knew too much about the legislative process. But really overall, 1 to 2 years kind of developing and start writing immediately, start doing the research immediately, but overall, probably 2 to 4 years to get something implemented. And then we didn't get to what those phases would look like, but that would be based on the research. Potentially doing a pilot study program, or gathering data from pilots and programs that already exist across the state to understand what the feasibility of implementation and an implementation timeline could look like. Collaboration, definitely nutrition personnel, in all the schools. We also talked about having a county or regional representative, possibly at the development district, since this would be mandated by the state and they would have compliance on their end, having someone more locally that can serve as a liaison and support structure for those schools. Also looking at in building the legislation, getting representation from schools and facilities, and particularly the facilities folks in schools that manage waste collection, potentially finance departments that do the procurement piece and the cost piece of these programs, health department, Natural Resources Defense Council, Environmental Law Institute was one that came up because they potentially could do some of the legwork and write policy, some draft policy potentially for the state. Solid waste directors, all those wonderful people. And then also making sure that we're engaging organizations that are on the recovery side, that better understand the logistics of getting that recovered food to and aiding those unhoused populations or those with food insecurity. The impact, so we'd have legislation, we're getting schools that are buying in. We got schools that are participating in some way across the state, all good things, and measuring that based on tonnage data and diversion numbers that we would be able to get based on what the school currently schools are currently doing versus new tracking numbers, with the goal of a 25% reduction in that waste of their overall waste based on national kind of data statistics. Needed resources, if you're gonna, we also talked about having an actual, so that nutrition personnel, that's actually somebody in the school that can support this program, like 1 point person per school, which would require an increase in funding to pay for that personnel, because teachers are already overloaded. Potentially a school club, students getting involved. Then we talked about potential incentives, such as a potential financial allocation to schools based on their diversion. If they're doing really well, how can some of those financial pieces maybe incentivize? And then also incredibly important is looking at and allowing time for schools to have contracts that would meet the needs of new regulation. So that could be, we talked about janitorial staff. You also have back of house kitchen staff that might be contracted, and making sure those align with the goals of the mandate. And then also expanding infrastructure. We recognize it's why we put the tier in there for the socioeconomic piece, is also because there's not access. So making that would need to be improved. And then just some additional considerations. Schools have a lot of different priorities, and how their funding is allocated is really complicated. And waste is not always, if not typically, often not a priority. So that's something to consider. Also, of course, all the federal regulations for school lunches, the difference between front and back of house programs. So that's waste that's being generated in the kitchen versus waste that's being generated in the cafeteria, and how we logistically do that. And then how to incorporate educational programming and then tie that into curriculum for those schools.
That was a smart goal. Good job. They were very specific. They were certainly measurable. That's attainable. I mean, even though it may seem like pie in the sky to have the whole state, that was a lot. You had a lot of good detail, attainable, realistic, and time-based. So good job. Thank you very much. We are going to switch back to the resources. I want to make sure we get these in. Give yourselves all a big pat on the back, and I apologize for missing the last group, but give yourself a big pat on the back. This was a lot of things to accomplish in one day, and some of this stuff would take months and months if we were kind of doing it collectively and over time. So good job. We're seeing a lot of resources come in here, so I just draw your attention to that. We have aerated static bays for composting. Excellent. We have standard reporting templates for natural disasters, like that tie in there. New equipment and infrastructure. That would be nice. Training for natural disaster reimbursement for FEMA and or TEMA and TDEC to join the effort. I think this was FEMA, but maybe it's TEMA. And repeal the plastic bag ban. Repeal of the plastic bag ban. Okay. And then we have a lot of community actors who can help communicate and educate. I like that. Political will for diversion mandates. Significant funding for infrastructure, grant funding, and to improve solid waste systems and infrastructure. Feel free, if you haven't seen yours, to put those in. We have one more question to ask you before we kind of wrap up, and if we have any other things. I see some things came through chat too about, Jay put a resource in there about an AI program called Raccoon Eyes, invented by some folks at Georgia Tech. Yeah, terrible name. He's got a link there, and visually captures and records and provides weights and metrics for food waste. So good. Sharing resources is really important and will be a continued important thing to do as we're doing that. I don't see any extra resources, so I guess you guys are all set with everything that was sent in. So we'll shift to the last question. I would be remiss if we had this great day of idea sharing to send you home or back to your office or continue to work in the office without a bit of homework. But I don't want to give you the homework. I want you to tell me what you think your homework is. So whether that is continuing some of this collaboration, report out to leadership, I love it already. Maybe it's connecting with a group that you hadn't even thought of before. Maybe it's keeping communication with TDEC and this planning team as we're going forward. We don't want your input to end now. This is your plan that is being created, and that's going to benefit everyone in the state. So it's really important that we get it right, and that your input is incorporated and directionally oriented. So connect with colleagues and cities that are currently composting. And getting a shout out to Jen for representing the team. There you go. We've talked to Representative Burchett about providing some federal funding for composting. He's a huge fan of composting. That's great. Continuing collaboration with TDEC and others to make sure that the input is captured into the new plan. That is important. Meeting with some local recyclers to make sure that we're on the same page and focused on the same end goal. I love that. If you are not currently talking to your recyclers, to your end markets, to your to your MRFs, going on tours, taking your local representatives, anyone who you want in that collaboration thing on a tour of a MRF or a composting facility or a fill in the blank, a C&D processing facility. Make sure to do that as a follow-up as well. Okay, work as one to find a plan that works or benefits all aspects of waste reduction. Keep working to help residents reduce waste through home composting. Learn about local industries to identify their future connections for recycling. Excellent. The others coming through here? Going once. I'm seeing stuff come in the chat. That's good too. All right, so I want to thank everyone so much for your time and concentration for this very long day. I hope that you found it valuable. Please reach out to this planning team. Jill, Ashley are here to answer any technical questions. Obviously, even education questions, I'm here. And keep the conversation going. Let's not let it end here. We appreciate your time. Does anyone else have any final words, TDEC folks? No? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
This is Amy somewhere. I can finally turn my camera on again. I just want to say thank you to everyone who came and participated, and thank you to Geosyntec for hosting the workshops and setting up the Zoom links and making the breakout rooms work. I think it was a successful day. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of the materials management team.
And you will all get a copy of this presentation, and this is not the end. You'll see when the draft plan comes out, you will have the opportunity to view that ahead of time as well. I think that's all we have. Ashley, did you have anything?
That's it. Thank you all for
Okay.
coming today. We really appreciate your participation.
Be safe out there.
And stay warm, everybody.